Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw him, you would even say he blows. Welcome to a very special holiday edition of the Sound Off Inbox here on the YouTube channel for the Solomonster Sounds Off podcast. I am the Solomonster, and this is Christmas Eve 2019. I thought I would do a little sort of a impromptu inbox for you guys. I'm always stockpiled with your questions. I've been very busy, but I thought this would be a nice little holiday gift to drop on everybody here on the Christmas holiday, or Hanukkah, depending on what you guys are celebrating, or Kwanzaa. Or maybe you don't need a reason to celebrate at all, but I thought it would be nice to give you an inbox. You can always submit questions, as you know, via email, thesolomonster@gmail.com. That is the place to send all of your questions to. Or you can drop your questions down below in the comments section of this video, and I will try to get to as many of them as I can for the next edition of the inbox, or maybe even on the main Sound Up podcast. You never know. So I thought what we would do today here, I don't have a lot of time, but I thought that it would be a good idea just to run through about half a dozen, maybe 6 or 7 of your questions that I've plucked out here to use, and have some fun here for this holiday week here. So we're going to get right into it. First question here comes from Mike in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania. Let me bring it up on here so I can see it, because my eyes are not what they used to be. I had been watching older big man matches, and after listening to this week's Sound Off, that would be episode 631. In case people are listening to this months from now, that's the episode he's referring to. I was wondering what some of your favorites were. I recently rewatched matches like Kenta Kobashi and Kensuke Sasaki, Vader and Hansen and Misawa against Joe, and there is something to these matches that is missing today. In the Kobashi and Sasaki match, there was 5 straight minutes of chops to the chest, and yet the Tokyo Dome was going nuts for it. Do you think something like this could ever make a comeback in WWE, AEW, or NWA? So what he's referring to is, I had a segment on this week's podcast where I was actually in the middle of reviewing NXT. Of all things, I was in the middle of a Cameron Grimes-Kushida match, I think it was. And I enjoyed the match, and I'm a huge fan of NXT, as anybody knows who listens to my show. But I had this epiphany of sorts that sort of hit me like a lightning bolt out of nowhere as I'm watching this match. And I'm watching the dives and the knee strikes and just a lot of the same stuff we see every single week on these and NXT is not the only one that's guilty. The main roster is guilty of it. AEW is guilty of it. And I just was thinking to myself, I had just watched a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. I don't even remember how they came up. Goldberg, when he was at his peak in WCW. All these feats of strength when he would lift up the giant in the air for a jackhammer, which is still one of the most incredible feats of strength in wrestling I've ever seen. For him to lift the giant up into the air and hold him there like that for a jackhammer is just mesmerizing to watch. And I started just going down this rabbit hole, and then I ended up watching CM Punk against Vince McMahon on Raw in 2012, and Ryback comes out. And the place is going nuts for him. And he gives Punk a meat hook clothesline. And the building is shaking. I mean, literally, the hard camera is shaking. And it got me thinking, we don't have as many big men in wrestling today. And big men who, when lightning strikes, they get over in such a way that the people just go nuts for them, right? We saw that with Braun Strowman a little bit. And they managed to bungle that whole thing. And I don't think he can ever really come back from that. In AEW, just to answer the last part of the question first, the person I think of is someone like the Luchasaurus. Now, the Luchasaurus will do flips and stuff that a guy who's 6'8" or whatever he is really shouldn't be able to do. Or at least that's what he's billed as. And maybe that's his wrestling height. Maybe he's a little shorter, but he's a big dude. And it's highlighted that much more when he's standing next to Jungle Boy or standing next to Marco Stunt. But I miss that. I miss having those big guys who just get over. There's something about them. They go on an undefeated streak, or they can do these feats of strength, and the people just buy into it, and they just go out there and they wreck people, and the place goes nuts. And I miss that. And so that was the nature of the segment I did on the Sound Off this week. As far as matches go, I think in the Kobashi match that he mentions here. I think there was something like 200 chops in that match. Something ridiculous like that. Vader and Hansen for sure would I think have to be on anyone's list as far as classic, big kind of hoss fights are concerned. The one I think of course, is the one where Vader's eyeball popped out. He had to pull his mask off and literally try to press his eyeball back into his eye socket. And he kept wrestling. So how do you not think of a match like that? Some of my personal favorites, Brock Lesnar and Big Show. Brock and Big Show had some pretty good matches together. If you go back to the Survivor Series match they had in 2002 when Paul Heyman turned and went with Big Show, what I loved about that match in Madison Square Garden, feats of strength. Brock Lesnar giving Big Show 500 pounds, a belly-to-belly suplex, a belly-to-belly overhead suplex. When he picked up Big Show for the first time for an F5, I mean, it's like commonplace now, and John Cena did it all the time, but this is pre-Cena, when Cena got big. To see him lift Big Show on his shoulders for an F5, just watch the crowd. It was incredible. So I remember those moments, and those are some of my favorite moments. So I think of Brock and Big Show. They had a great stretcher match at Judgment Day in 2003. Doesn't get talked about a lot. I think it's kind of underrated. That's a match I would say go back and watch. Undertaker and Batista at WrestleMania 23. Two big men, right? They went out there, and I thought they had probably the match of the night. They had a great World Heavyweight Championship match. Brock Lesnar and Undertaker, Hell in a Cell 2002. Actually, their Hell in a Cell in 2015 was not bad either, but I like the 2002 one more. So those are some examples. And you know what? Again, Goldberg gets a lot of hate. Brock and Goldberg, WrestleMania 33. I was there in Orlando for the match. Only went about 6 minutes. But it was all action. It was smash mouth right from the bell. Boom, boom, boom. They didn't give you a chance to breathe. And before you knew it, it was over. But for the time it lasted, I thought it was great. And the crowd loved it. Everybody ate it up. It was exactly what it needed to be. It was redemption for WrestleMania 20. So those are some of my, personal favorite ones that I would think of. I would, if I wanted to throw another one out there at you, and this is one of those, I guess you'd call them a guilty pleasure, right? A guilty pleasure is something most people hate but you like. A guilty pleasure of mine is whenever Yokozuna and The Undertaker would be in the ring together. And I actually wasn't a huge fan of their casket match at the Royal Rumble. But there was something about those two. I don't know. It worked. It worked. I think back to Survivor Series in 93, that great spot where they're on opposing teams and they're outside the ring. And Yokozuna goes and smashes Undertaker's head face first into the steps. And he whips his head back and he whips his hair back and then he does the head turn and he looks at Yokozuna and he's got this look on his face like he just saw a ghost. I love that. I love moments like that. So it doesn't always have to be move, 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 flip dive and a lot of the stuff we see the smaller guys doing these days. That style works. It's fine. I'm not blaming them. But I do think something is missing from wrestling when it comes to these big monster types that have that explosiveness to them. I don't want to see a big guy with 2 left feet who moves at a snail's pace. That's boring. That's boring. Some big guys are boring. They lumber around the ring. They can't do much. I don't have time for that. But these other big guys that have gotten over the years, it just seems like there's less and less of them now in wrestling. Either that or these companies are doing a poor job of discovering them. I don't know. It's one or the other. But can we see it again? Yeah, I think we can. Absolutely. Let's see. And actually, I mentioned the Luchasaurus earlier. I think if they play their cards right, he could be a world champion in AEW. He could be their biggest star. They just have to take their time with them and do the opposite of whatever WWE did with Braun Strowman. I think they could learn a lesson from what WWE did with Braun. All right. Brock. I don't think Lesnar. Brock from Wilmington, North Carolina. One of the things I've heard you talk about is how Cain is one of the most versatile performers of all time. I think there's another name that can compete with Cain for that title, playing the heel face comedy roles, and that is Daniel Bryan. Buy or sell on the more versatile performer, Cain or Daniel Bryan? I lost my holiday lights. Oh well. I wanted the lights on every slide. More of a festive mood that way. And I forgot to do that. Well, that's all right. We don't need bells and whistles around here anyway. You get the point. It's a special holiday inbox. What do you don't need me to wear a Santa hat. I thought about it. I did think about wearing a Santa hat, and I thought I had one laying around, and I couldn't find it, and I wasn't going to buy one. So the one that I did try on in the store was too big for me, or it was too small for my head. I got a big head. What can I say? Cain and Daniel Bryan, buy or sell. A more versatile performer. They can both do it all. You know, we've seen Cain over the years be the monster. We've seen him be a comedic figure. We've seen him unmasked doing, soliloquies in the middle of the ring and setting people on fire and, taking jumper cables to Shane McMahon's balls and doing all these different things. And he's bounced around from heel to face to heel, funny, not funny. And he's got far more longevity than Daniel Bryan does. So if I had to give the edge to anybody, it would be Cain. But Daniel Bryan is the same way. Maybe that's why their tag team works so well. I mean, he can be the babyface. He can be the evil vegan heel. He can do comedy. He can be serious. And he's a smaller guy than Cain is. Cain may be more believable as like a badass. He's more physically imposing. But I wouldn't sell Daniel Bryan short. Daniel Bryan is one of the best in the world for a reason. He can do it all. So I'm going to call it a wash. I think they're pretty evenly matched as far as what they're able to do. But you probably won't find very many better than either one of those two when it comes to playing all of those roles and playing them well. So that's where I think the real value is in those two. Cameron from London, England. Let's see here. With the 2020 Royal Rumble being promoted as including NXT, do you feel like either the men's or women's match has to have an NXT winner? And if so, who would you have win them and why? I've talked about this on the podcast. My early prediction for the women's Royal Rumble match is Shayna Baszler. She may not go to the main roster before the Royal Rumble. I mean, she might, but she doesn't have to. Now, I don't know what the rules are going to be. So, for example, if you're a SmackDown guy and you win the men's Royal Rumble match, I don't remember what they did this past year. They change it every few years. So, I don't remember what they did this year. I'll have to go back and look. But in the past, it's changed where you can choose the brand champion that you want to face. Sometimes you will face the champion who is on your brand and you don't have a choice. I would say if they give them a choice, Shayna Baszler, we know NXT is going to be represented in these Rumble matches this year. That's the. I don't think WWE has announced it yet, but that's the belief. That's the rumor. That's the way it was in Survivor Series. And they won. NXT won at Survivor Series. Why wouldn't they be involved in the Royal Rumble? So the belief is that it's going to be 10 from Raw, 10 from SmackDown, and 10 from NXT. Perfect. They should have more representation this year. Shayna Baszler could be the NXT representative, or one of them, in the Women's Rumble and go on to win. And then she can choose Becky Lynch, assuming Becky beats Asuka. She can choose Becky Lynch as her opponent to challenge for the Raw Women's title, and that's how she gets to the main roster. So that's what I would do as far as the Women's Rumble. I don't think you can have two NXT winners. I think that's too much. If you were only going to have a men's winner and not a women's winner, I think you got to look at Keith Lee for the men's Royal Rumble match, and then he can challenge for the NXT title, or maybe he wants to challenge for one of the other championships. I see the Women's Rumble as being more likely to be won by an NXT personality, and I think it should be Shayna Baszler. Of course, I have no knowledge of whether or not Ronda Rousey is planning on coming back, and that could throw a monkey wrench into things. But assuming she doesn't come back, my early pick is Shayna. Let's move along here to Terrence from Atlanta, Georgia. You would think eggnog this holiday season. I can't have eggnog. Can't have it. So I'll just stick to hard liquor if I have to drink. Since the launch of AEW, I cannot help but notice that a lot of their performers need a little fine-tuning as far as move execution goes. Well, some of those Dark Order creepers do. Do you think they need their own version of the WWE Performance Center or their own version of the WCW Power Plant? I think that would be a great idea. In fact, Dustin Rhodes has talked about recently about how he wants to open a school down in Texas. And he's, I think, lobbying Tony Khan. He wants that to basically be the de facto performance center, training center for AEW. Dustin Rhodes has been doing it for a long time. I can't think of a better person to head up an operation like that than him. They've already got him under contract. If he wants to put all of his efforts more into that and help train, the next generation, by all means, I think that would be a great place to start. They're going to have to cultivate their own talent. They can pull from the indies. There will be WWE people who let their contracts run out and maybe they'll jump to AEW. I think AEW should be a little more selective going forward in 2020 as far as who they bring in, as far as ex-WWE guys are concerned. But at some point, they're going to have to start, I think, to create their own talent or pull from the indies, people who maybe are new but have a lot of promise. And let a guy like Dustin Rhodes and bring in other veterans. I mean, they got Tully Blanchard. Maybe Tully... Look, they had Dusty Rhodes doing promo classes before he passed away at the Performance Center. Why not make use of a guy like Tully Blanchard and have him drop by and teach promo classes at an AEW Performance Center? They have some of these people already under contract. Why not make use of them in that way? I think that's a great idea. Neil... in the United Kingdom, what are your thoughts on Chris Candido? I always found him to be the most underrated performer since he could work, talk, do comedy, and was generally very entertaining. I think Chris Candido is, and I think a lot of people would probably say, very underrated. You don't hear him talked about a lot. He never achieved superstar status. He was a star in ECW, was never the top guy or anything like that. In WWE, he was portrayed as a joke. And then Sonny, of course, took off. Sonny became the hot star. Candido never really did much. And he had, he and Tammy both, they had their issues, their drug problems. They got in a bit of trouble over the years. And then in the early days of TNA, Chris Candido was having something of a career renaissance. Was it the Naturals, I think it was? I could be wrong. But he had a good thing going with one of the teams. He was like managing one of the teams in TNA. And then I heard, there was a blood clot and he passed away. And he had been getting his life together. By all accounts, he was doing well. He didn't have a lot of the same problems he used to have. And he could have had a career rejuvenation. And he was robbed of that. And, wrestling was robbed of that. I think he probably had a lot left to give. So... a lot of untapped potential there. I think he got a raw deal in WWE, and I was going to say fell in with the wrong crowd. It's not that he fell in with the wrong crowd, it's that he had the wrong crowd against him. And that didn't work to his advantage. So, yeah, I agree. He could do it all. He could be more serious. We didn't really see that in WWE. That was more comedic. We were talking about versatile performers a few minutes ago with Daniel Bryan and Cain. Chris Candido could be on that list too. Maybe not at the very top, but he was pretty versatile himself and should have accomplished a lot more than he did. So it's too bad what happened to him. Brandon from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are nearing Wrestle Kingdom 14 and the retirement of Jushin Thunder Liger. I recently saw a list from New Japan ranking Liger's top 20 greatest matches of his career. What are your top 5 favorite Jushin Liger matches? And then he also wrote in here WCW, TNA, NXT include. Was he in TNA? Was Liger in TNA? Maybe he wrestled in TNA. I know he had the one match against Tyler Breeze in NXT. And I've already pitched this, that if they're going to put someone of an international background in the Hall of Fame in 2020, Liger's retiring in January. He's going to be honored by New Japan after Wrestle Kingdom. I can't think of a better time to put Liger in their Hall of Fame. Bring him on down to Tampa in April and put him in their Hall of Fame too. The match, when I think of his matches, look, I mean, I can't sit here and tell you that I've seen this whole catalog of Jushin Thunder Liger matches. I'm like a lot of American wrestling fans. My first exposure to Liger came in WCW. So I saw some of his WCW work. I remember the opening match on Nitro in '95 at the Mall of America, he and Brian Pillman, and that wasn't even their best match. Years later, I saw the Super Brawl match with him and Pillman, which was a lot better. That was an excellent match. So if I were making a list, the matches with Pillman in WCW, but especially that Super Brawl 2, I think it was, probably 92, that match was excellent. So that match would be on my list. I saw a match in the last few years on Daily Motion or YouTube. I don't think I had seen it before, with Liger and the Great Muta from 1996. And I had not seen this match before, and I actually watched it again when a few months ago. I'm already in 2020. To me, 2019, I'm already checked out. We got a week left to go. It was only a few months ago with the Minoru Suzuki and Kishin Liger and all that. So I watched it again. But I had seen the Liger Muta match from, I want to say 1996. It was over 20 years ago. And that match had the debut of the Kishin Liger character, persona, whatever you want to call it, demon. And that was a great match. And I didn't know what Kishin Liger even was, really, until this year. And then I saw the debut of the character. And it was scary as all hell. And then he used the mist on Muta that Muta was known for using. And I think Liger ended up losing the match anyway. That's a great match. That might be at the top of my list, if the Pillman match isn't. Okay, I don't know what show it was. It was from 96. It was the Kishin Liger first appearance of that character in a match. And I think Kishin Liger has only really made 4 or 5 appearances in the entirety of Liger's career. Suzuki unmasked him a few months ago, and that's when after that, we saw the return of Kishin Liger. And it's scary stuff. Obviously he's older now and bald and all that, so he looks a little bit different. But he becomes this different personality. And I'm watching it and I'm thinking, it's like the Fiend, right? We talk about Bray Wyatt as the Fiend. He's got the dual personalities going, and the Fiend can be pretty creepy. But Kishin Liger is, especially as somebody who really wasn't familiar with that persona until recently. It's like, scary as the Fiend is, I think when the Fiend goes to sleep at night, he checks under his bed for Kishin Liger. Like, Liger was the first one to really, I think, freak people out with this alternative persona that just sort of came out of nowhere. So, I don't know if we'll have a chance to see it again. He's wrestling his final 2 matches at Wrestle Kingdom in 2 weeks, and then that's it. So we may have already seen the last of Kishin Liger. But, as far as his best matches or my favorite matches of his that I've seen, I think of those 2. I think of the Pillman match at Super Brawl, and I think of the Muta match from 96 where we saw Kishin for the first time. So anyway, that's my answer. I have unfortunately not seen enough of his matches to put together a top 10 and definitively say that here's the bottom 5, here's the top 5. But if you have any suggestions of matches that maybe I haven't seen, that I should go back and watch as we barrel towards his retirement, leave a comment down below, and I would love to go check it out. Ryan, it's a long one here, from Marietta, Pennsylvania. Let me take a drink here. So parched. I just love the fact that I've been off from work the last couple of days. I've been able to relax a little bit. I don't get a lot of time to really relax. If I have free time, I'm always working on something else. I wasn't going to do this inbox, and I'm like, hell, why not? People are going to be sitting around on Christmas bored out of their minds. We'll do a short one. We'll do 20, 30 minutes. We'll do an inbox. Anyway, Ryan from Marietta, Pennsylvania. I've been following the rebirth of the NWA, and Powerrr has quickly become my favorite wrestling show. My favorite wrestler in the company has been Tim Storm. I did not know anything about him before, but he's quickly become one of my favorite baby faces in all of wrestling, with older wrestlers like PCO, Chris Jericho, and the Rock and Roll Express getting a lot of attention. It seems nobody mentions Tim Storm in the same conversation. Why do you think most fans seem to ignore him and the great work he has done to make the NWA and the World's Heavyweight Championship relevant again? I think it really has more to do with the fact that the NWA just doesn't have a huge following yet. And there really just aren't that many people watching. Not as many as are watching WWE or NXT or AEW. So a lot of people say, "Oh, Tim Storm, what is it, Lance Storm's father? Who is that?" They don't know who he is. I didn't know who he was until the 10 Pounds of Gold series. When he was running around as the NWA champion 2 years ago, I guess it would have been now. And Lagana and Corgan and them were putting these video pieces on YouTube together that were just amazing. It was great. It was great character development. I didn't know he was a teacher. And then you see him sitting in the classroom talking about what it's like to be a teacher. And, he's getting older. He's kind of the elder statesman in wrestling. And here he is. He never thought he'd have the opportunity, but now he's the NWA champion. And he gets to travel around and defend the title. I don't really think he had a long reign before Nick Aldis won the title from him. But out of nowhere, this guy, he became one of the most likable baby faces in all of wrestling. And I've said that from the moment Powerrr debuted in October. I said, he is the best babyface, best pure babyface maybe in all of wrestling. How can you hate this guy? He comes out, he's very modest. He talks about his mother, Mama Storm, is watching everything I do. She's my biggest fan. And now, of course, they're doing this storyline where he can no longer ever challenge for the NWA Championship since he lost to Nick Aldis. I'm sure at some point he will. Aldis now has gone heel. He's formed his heel faction in the NWA. They attacked Tim Storm last week. I haven't watched the latest Powerrr yet. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see where the story is going. But I just think it has more to do with the fact that not many people are watching the NWA. They probably don't even know who he is. But if they did, if he was on Raw or if he was on Dynamite, and I think Tim Storm in the NWA is perfect. I don't think he should ever go anywhere. But if he was on a show like that in front of 1 million people every week or 2 million people, he'd have a lot more fans than he has now. He may be 53 or however old he is, but maybe he can't do a lot of the moves that the younger guys can do. Maybe he can't do a Canadian Destroyer the way that Ricky Morton can. And Ricky Morton's older than him. But he doesn't have to. That's not why he's there. That's not what he's there for. I'm a big Tim Storm fan. I like Tim Storm a lot. But I think it really has more than anything. It has to do with the exposure or lack of exposure the NWA has gotten. That's the only reason why. And I think this is the last one. We'll close out with this one. In looking through Kurt Angle's match list on the Internet Wrestling Database, it says that he fought Owen Hart in a dark match on May 10th, 1999. Would this have been Owen's last actual match? If these two had met on television, how do you see the match unfolding? That comes from Mark in Massachusetts. They did wrestle. There is no video footage that has ever been released. I don't know that any video footage was shot, but I find that hard to believe. I'm sure they have it in their vault somewhere. And they've been putting out hidden gems on the network for a long time. They've had a couple, I think, of unreleased match DVD release type things, and it's not been on any of those. Maybe it'll pop up on an unreleased DVD next year or something, but no video exists publicly. There is one photo of, I think it's Kurt Angle in the middle of a power slam on Owen Hart. So we know the match exists. We actually have photographic evidence that the match exists. They had that one dark match to prove that they shared the ring together. And in fact, Owen supposedly, as the story goes, he told people backstage after the match was over that he thought Angle was a future world champion and Hall of Famer. Now, the WWE Hall of Fame was pretty much dormant in 1999, so I'm a little skeptical that he would have said, hey, he's a future Hall of Famer. But it's possible. Now, it's very possible that he saw something in Kurt and he went to the back and he told people, hey, this kid's got something. Or he's a future world champion one day. He could be a top guy in the company. Maybe he did. Kurt didn't even know. Last year, I think it was last year, Kurt put something on Twitter or Instagram with a quote from like supposedly attributed to Owen saying that, oh, he's a future Hall of Famer, a world champion. And Angle was blown away. He had never heard that before. But, you know, I don't doubt that Owen could have seen something in Kurt that maybe other people couldn't have seen at the time. You know, as far as, was it his final match? No. And I could have sworn that the last match Owen had was against Edge and Christian. I thought I remember hearing that years ago. And before I came on here, I checked a few things, you know, and I went through and just to confirm, because there are records of this. And sure enough, his last match was the night before he died. So there was a live event the night before Over the Edge in 99, and Owen teamed up with Jeff Jarrett, and they beat Edge and Christian. So, yeah, that's a cool thing for Edge and Christian to kind of keep in their cap, as far as they can say that we had the last match of Owen Hart's career. I'm sure it's a somber thing too. But yeah, no, the match with Kurt was not his final match. He had several more right up until the day he died, where he was going to win the Intercontinental title and beat the Godfather, and then of course we all know what happened then. As far as how would a match have gone between the two of them, I mean, however it was booked, right? That's the easy answer. I guess it depends. Like, if they had taken that match and put that on television in 99, I still think it probably would have been a pretty good match. But Kurt Angle in 99 was very different than Kurt Angle in 2001 or 2002. Physically, he was less beat up. But I don't know that he was as good. There's no way he was as good in the ring back then. I mean, he picked up on it very quickly. He started out good. He got great. So, are we talking Owen Hart, let's say, from the late 90s against Kurt Angle from like 01, 02, 03? I think it would have been an incredible match. But even in 99, I think as a TV match, I think it would have been excellent. I think I've said this before. My dream tag team match, I said this years ago, and I still feel the same way. If I had, people talk about dream matches all the time. People just like have just bastardized that. Everything is a dream match. You know, even now when like NXT and AEW will promote matches for the shows coming up week to week, this week it's a dream match. And like 7 times out of 10, it ain't no dream match. To me, a real tag team dream match would have been Bret Hart and Owen Hart from like 1994. Let's say the 94 version of Bret and Owen Hart against Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit from like 2002. 94 Bret and Owen against 02 Angle and Benoit. That's my dream tag team match right there. Pure wrestling heaven, if you are a wrestling fan. And I get sad sometimes. I mean, obviously the Benoit stuff, but even back before Benoit did what he did, and he died, Bret had his accident. And, you know, he had the concussions, and then he had the stroke, and he wasn't able to wrestle anymore. And we really were deprived of some potentially great matches that Bret could have had in WWE. I think he would have been back in WWE a lot sooner if he was physically able to go. Because he's talked about waking up in the middle of a dream where he dreamt about what it would be like to wrestle Kurt Angle. Like, he had Angle in a headlock, and then he woke up. Like, he would dream about these things. So when the fans say dream matches, like Bret Hart would literally dream about having matches against guys like Kurt Angle. And the matches they could have had in the early 2000s, oh my God, are you kidding me? Come on. We missed out on all that stuff. Sucks, man. It sucks. Well, what the hell are you going to do? That's the way it goes sometimes, you know? We have the images in our head of what those matches would have been like. So, anyway, hopefully that answers your question. And we'll close out here. A short inbox. Yeah, I just wanted to... Actually, you know what? It's comparable to the first inbox I did. It's about 35 minutes. That's a pretty decent... I didn't even expect to go that long. That's a pretty decent length right there. But I really just wanted to tackle a few questions here over the holidays, especially if any of you are bored out of your minds and don't have a whole lot going on and you're looking to kill half an hour. Figure why not give you an inbox. leave questions down below in the comments section if you want to possibly have them read out loud on the next inbox, whenever that may be. I try to do these once a month if I can, or every 4 to 6 weeks. One of my resolutions for the new year is to try to do more of them and get on camera more often. So leave your questions down below or email me. The Solomonster@gmail.com is my email address. You can follow me on Twitter @Solomonster, although don't send questions there because I may or may not answer them. So leave them down below. Hit the thumbs up button if you like these features and you want to see more of them. I need feedback from you. If you don't like them, I may not do as many of them. But if people like them, I'll do more of them. So hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment down below. And I want to take this opportunity here as we wrap up to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. If you celebrate, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Happy New Year as we head into 2020. 2019 was a very good year for the Sound Off, and so here's to bigger and better things here in 2020 and beyond. So on that note, be well, stay safe, have yourselves a fantastic holiday and an even better new year, and hopefully you get some downtime from work like I do. That's always a good thing, and I will see you guys back here for a brand new Sound Off this weekend. As always, each and every Sunday you can download the Sound Off podcast. And back here real soon for another inbox. Until next time, Merry Christmas!